In the age of communications, everything is fast. One moment you see a new announcement, which is simply gorgeous, and the next second a wild manifesto, images, thumbnails, memes, or a person with a Homer complex spoils the whole content. So that is effectively the topic for this video. And I have two questions for the audience in case they want to be answered. What do you think about the spoilers? Have you ever expected something for so long just to get spoiled in the dumbest of ways? Now, just be respectful with each other, because sometimes people get heated quite easily, and that is not the point here, but to share some ideas about the topic. So let's begin. The spoiler culture is something that has been around for so long. However, the deal is that specific word wasn't used. It was up until 1971 that Douglas C. Kenney wrote a satire under such name, and the idea was to spoil different kinds of content. Nowadays, this topic feels like stepping on multiple landmines here and there, not just while sharing an opinion but also by simply scrolling. And the main idea for this video arose when the direct about Fire Emblem Fortune's Wave was announced. My feed was drowned by a nun with a weapon, which I won't deny it had me laughing for a lot of time. For the power of friendship and this gun. And that would have been the anecdote. But then there was a publication by one of the many pages that shares news which said something like, "No, Nintendo spoiled the idea, now this is ruined," and there were plenty of angry faces. Unfortunately, I don't have the post, however you can imagine a lot of people complaining about the direct, and how they shouldn't present parts of the plot as well as other mechanics. And a couple of images below that post, there was another group using this image from Dragon Ball saying something like, "It's been X number of days and we don't know who Ishmael is." Two opposite sides of the coin. People getting angry while swearing they are not going to buy the game, and on the other side, people waiting for more information. The spoilers are just the tip of the iceberg, because we can dive some more and get into leaks. Leaks that sometimes kill a whole experience or end up with the job of hundreds of people. Now, for the time being, I don't want to talk regarding this specific topic, cause it is kinda dirty. Either you decide to jump deep into it, or better avoid it. There are no gray scales here. Nonetheless, it is going to be important for later sections, so just keep it in mind. With all of this said, I'm sure some of you want to know my opinion on the matter. To me, spoilers are a double-edged sword, and also a bit meh, and I'll explain why. Personally, I don't mind the spoilers because I enjoy RPGs a lot, which is probably the genre with the biggest stories. I don't know many visual novels, so if someone can clarify the point, let us know. But the thing is that spoilers aren't that big of a deal. Or at least, I don't see it that way because oftentimes JRPGs aren't so simple to get the whole context in just a couple of images or ideas. And the reason is because they are not like a puzzle. Some stories are so complex, filled with many details, and if someone explains parts of those ideas, it is not like everything was lost, because that is just an experience, the way in which someone lived and understood the game. To clarify this point, allow me to give an example on the matter. Back when Xenoblade Chronicles 2 was released, a long RCB talking about the series appeared. If memory works well, it was like 1 hour long explaining what was the deal between the Xenoblade Chronicles 1, 2 and X. I saw the whole bit, and of course it was filled with spoilers left and right. And not so long ago I played these games. Some may say that looking at something like that was going to kill the experience, and to be honest with you, it didn't. I enjoy these games like you have no idea. The whole narrative, cast of characters, as well as every challenge found in the way. If JRPGs died with just a couple of ideas, then I wouldn't be that much into them considering I am a story-driven person. However, it is fair to mention that some games or genres aren't that great on that front. For example, Monster Hunter games. I have only met a couple of people who genuinely play these games because of the story. Not the lore, that is something different, just the story of the game. And the deal with these entries is that in these past years Capcom has shown every single monster as if we were talking about a fighting game. And while that doesn't completely kill the experience, unfortunately it diminished the journey, considering some of us just play these games to fight these monsters. On this front, it was no surprise why Lord Bagelgoose was loved so much. This thing appearing out of nowhere was something amazing. In any case, both sides have understandable reasons to like and dislike spoilers. However, completely opposite directions are the ones that are usually quite loud about the subject. Because I'm trying to find every single way to spoil things to everybody, while others simply disappear trying to avoid any kind of contact with the media. Which is ironic at the same time, because some companies are the ones who end up spoiling the adventure. Not sure if that was the case with Fire Emblem, to be honest. I don't really plan to see the direct, but that could be an example. Sometimes they appear because of bots images, like The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess for the Wii U. You just look at the art and it pretty much lets you know what is going to happen. If you played Expedition 33 and you know some bits of French, you get spoiled by literally listening to the music. I don't know French and I was catching things here and there while moving around. Well, I don't blame people trying to avoid things to be, let's say, surprised. It is a cool feeling when you get to see things for yourself, but that is the same reason why I was explaining the thing about the puzzle. If the story of a game, book, movie or whatever is so weak that it leaves just because of an image, then I am not so sure it was worth looking at it. Reason why plenty of companies decide to spoil things by themselves, or try to ask fans to not say anything on the matter, which also works as a kind of strategy. Because if the image is the whole reason why something is important, then people start to rush to be the first ones to see what happens. They say that they don't like to be spoiled, but in the process, it is like they are a person with eating disorders, slamming food in their mouth, so no one out there can take anything out of their plate. And let me tell you, but you are being trained to be a reactive consumer, which usually leads into one of two sides. Either you live trying to be the first on everything, or you stop enjoying things because of how you are consuming content. In a certain way, that is the reason why I don't like to share too much about a story while doing a review. Those are my opinions, but that's pretty much about it. The idea is that if you guys are interested in something, you can go out there and experience the journey on your own. But okay, let's respect that feeling towards things. If you truly want to experience the power of randomness, then buy video games like I do. Most of times I have no idea what I am buying. All I do is look at the box, front cover, back cover, and be like yeah or nay. Needless to mention that sometimes I end up buying a lot of weird games. However, it is also fair to look at the other side of the coin. Those who look for information like there's no tomorrow, which ironically turns into another kind of disorder. And what can I say? Forbidden things have always been attractive to human beings. Which is the reason why there are whole allegories regarding those topics. You need to be told that something is forbidden, like do not eat this damn apple, stay away from knowledge, and then everything takes color, and weird things start to appear, people behave in a strange manner, or they end up going crazy, because who in their right mind is prepared to know the truth? And well, that is where leaks come into place, which is probably the dirtiest kind of a spoiler. Dirty spoilers most people end up covering, and sometimes twisting because it looks like a good idea. Now, in general, I don't pay that much attention to the media, but back when the Terra leak happened, it seems like Typhlosion became into a hated Pokemon, and a hated Pokemon became into something like a hero. Some of you guys are quite creative with these artworks, not gonna lie. Ironically, later seems like there was a misconception on the matter, and it is rather funny to see how these kinds of topics spread like wildfire. And eventually, plenty of us get to know parts of other stories we don't really care about. Let me put some examples, because there are certain stories that become so legendary in their own way, or perhaps part of memes that permeate to the masses as a common knowledge, like Dracula's story. Who is Darth Vader? Etc. etc. There is a point where most people haven't seen a specific something, but they know about the matter, which in truth they don't really know, cause once again, in some cases there are interpretations in between. Not necessarily with Dracula or Vader, but sometimes a lie can turn into a truth. How marvelous or scary if you look at the people who know how to use these ideas, right? For better or worse, not many people out there really care to know about specific stories, or something like that. Sometimes their whole purpose is to get extra clicks, reason why there's so much noise within news channels, explaining every single detail, dissecting frame by frame a 140p vid to share a piece of their mind, which eventually turns into repeated information. Okay, at the end of the day we can live with those things, even with a thumbnail sharing important parts of a story. But something I do not agree with is when people start to take a morbid attitude regarding news. For example, when the Siege 2 was leaked, personally it wasn't that big of a deal, because it is well known that Nintendo left powerful consoles after what happened with the GameCube, and doing a weird move as the Wii U was a bad idea. At least my bet was either going for something completely unexpected or adding a 2 next to Switch. And whatever the case, people started to expect its announcement, which didn't happen for at least 7 or 8 months if memory works well. Meanwhile, Nintendo was announcing a clock and other features. Then, well, plenty out there start to get angry, and something similar happens with other kinds of leaks, quickly turning against the publisher or those doing the presentations. Ironic, don't you think? How a leaker turns much more important than those doing the actual announcements. At least these are my opinions on the matter. Spoilers don't bother me that much because I grew up waiting for magazines over several months, and sometimes it was much more exciting to share some knowledge here and there with friends who knew the games. But okay, what is the lesson regarding these kinds of topics? Every person is going to have a different idea, which is respectable. However, it is important to get why you're having certain behaviors towards things. Either consuming stuff trying to be the first because of fear and anxious feelings, or living out of speculation and expectations. In general, opposite sides of the spectrum are rather pathologic. With this, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.